And now I'd like to introduce Sue, which I'm just really excited that Sue could be here with us today. Sue's just taken on a new role recently in the last few months. She's travelling all over the place, different things from studying overseas, a very exciting journey, and I've always enjoyed our conversation, so I'm sure that we're going to enjoy the presentation today. So, thank you, Sue.
Thank you. Well, thank you everyone for coming here today. I just need to let you know that cyber-physical systems has nothing to do with cybersecurity, although we might apply cybersecurity. Cyber-physical systems is about connecting the physical and digital worlds. So my role as Research Director of Cyber-Physical Systems means that I'm looking after a team of researchers that look at robotics and autonomous systems, imaging and computer vision, cybernetics, and also distributed sensing systems. So these are all technologies that we can use to try and bring the digital and physical worlds together. So I'm going to be telling you things, I suppose, from my perspective, I guess giving you an insight into how I got where I am, and also the importance that transferable skills have played in that role. So, what are transferable skills? What are we going to be talking about today? So there's probably no surprise, and you can actually probably find lists of hundreds of these on the internet. But in general, I guess a lot of people refer to transferable skills as your soft skills, although I think that undervalues them because a lot of these soft skills can actually be quite hard to learn. And really though, at the heart of it, in my view, a lot of these transferable skills are things that if you apply yourself and are happy to, I guess, open your mind to experience new things, that you can actually pick up. So it's not like you necessarily have to go back and get a full university degree to be able to get transferable skills. As long as you apply your attention to how you can do better in all of these areas, then these are the sort of things that you can learn by observation and learn by doing. So what does that mean for people who are working in the IT space? Well, the World Economic Forum, and you've probably heard the term future of work a lot. A lot of people are putting out different informations about the future of work, what the workforce will be looking like in the future, what sort of skills do we need, what jobs there will be, what jobs there won't be. Well, the World Economic Forum actually puts out a bit of a report that tries to analyse some of the trends that are happening. So according to them, the trends that are driving our particular industry really revolve around the rapid speed at which so many things are changing. So in my area, particularly in robotics, some of these things like advances in computing power are truly having transformational impacts. For example, in robotics, we really think that we're reaching a tipping point in that technology where we're going to see robots move from the factory floor, where we've actually had them for the last 70 years, and in some ways they're nothing new, to a time where, because they can process so much information on board as they move around, that we're much more likely to see robots out in the world interacting with us. So all of these things are having a huge impact in the sort of the realm of cyber-physical systems, which is where I'm working, and they will have an influence, I guess, on all of us working in the IT sector. And I just put that image there to give you an idea of where we originally came from when we had our first computers, and they used to take up whole floors of space, and now we have the same processing power in our pockets most of the time. So it really is amazing. And I think sometimes we don't think about how rapidly these changes are occurring. And now, according to the World Economic Forum, these are the main areas of technology adoption impacting our sector. So as you can see, probably no surprise, big data is the number one. But there are a lot of other areas: machine learning, cloud computing, Internet of Things, encryption, blockchain. You've probably heard of a lot of these things, but these are increasingly going to have an impact, and probably also point to the areas where there are going to be opportunities in the future in the IT sector. But what are the emerging skills required? So the World Economic Forum also actually did this not just by sector but also by country. So I thought, well, it'd be interesting to have a look at what do they feel are going to be the most important skills in the future in Australia. And as you can see, creativity, analytical thinking, active learning, complex problem solving, emotional intelligence, resilience, stress tolerance, and flexibility. What really struck me about this list is that all of these are transferable skills, arguably, except, with the exception perhaps of technology design and programming. But again, technology design and programming, that's not something, again, that you necessarily have to go back to university and get a whole degree on. Those are actually things that you can often learn from on-the-job experience, or by actually going out and educating yourself through different mechanisms. And the World Economic Forum made a few predictions about what the workforce is going to be looking like in the future. So what are the types of jobs that they think we will see increasing in number, and what are the types of jobs that they think will be declining? And I'm putting this up there with a word of caution, in as much as I think that sometimes you'll see the same roles on different lists depending on who you talk to. But I think it's fair to say that anything where you can actually, which has routine, repetitive aspects to it, if that whole job is not under threat, probably aspects of that job are under threat, if that makes sense. Because it's easy to automate tasks, and I suppose depending on how task-driven a lot of occupations are, will probably determine how at risk those jobs are at in the future. Now, what you can't make into a routine, repetitive kind of task, though, are things that require a lot of the soft skills that we've been mentioned, like creativity, that ability to solve complex problems. Those are all things that we have today not being able to, and I really don't think that we will see in the near future algorithms really being able to replace people. But probably no surprise, a lot of the trends that they think are emerging in terms of the job market are going to be mirroring the trends that we saw in terms of the technologies that are influencing our sector. So data analysts and scientists, of course, linking with how important big data will be in the future. AI and machine learning specialists, and I can tell you they're as rare as hen's teeth, because they're the sort of people that make the world that I inhabit at the moment, cyber physical systems, function. So yes, big data specialists are going to be very important. This list is all fantastic news for everyone in the IT sector, you'd have to say. Whereas obviously there are a lot of other roles that have more routine functions that likely are at risk, or at least aspects of those roles will be at risk. But what I find really interesting is the way that we are going to be retraining our workforce and potentially reskilling to adopt a lot of these new technologies and make changes in companies. Because I think we've got a lot of different choices to make. But what I found really interesting from this World Economic Forum report was that they think that this is the projected future of the use of training providers. And what we're seeing is a real trend away from people getting education from the traditional sectors, from universities, into a lot of training being provided in-house within companies. And also I think what that figure also is really encompassing is people's self-training. So I think we're moving away from that time when if you wanted to call yourself a specialist in a certain area. Now obviously if you wanted to be a cybersecurity expert, then I definitely recommend you go and actually do a university degree to make sure you have the backing in doing that. But there are a lot of areas, particularly in artificial intelligence, where you can go and learn from massively open online courses. Or in Queensland here we have Queensland AI, which is a meetup where they actually have sort of a community way of learning, and they run their own courses. They're not accredited at this point, but I think we're getting to the point where for some very specific skills, you don't have to go back and get a university degree as long as you're prepared to go out there and get the knowledge that's required to be able to do those particular tasks. And that's something that I think will be very important in the future, and I think we're already seeing this trend, is what they call micro-credentialing, where you don't have to go back and spend a whole 3 or 4 years at university to get a degree, where you actually just specialise on the particular areas that you need. And how we get that information to be able to form a micro-credential, I think, is what's a very open field at the moment. So what this prediction is suggesting is that a lot of that's going to happen within companies, perhaps our universities will actually start to evolve a bit to the point where they also are in the business of helping people get these micro-credentials. But I think it's, with the rapid speed of change that we're seeing in technology, I don't think that people have the time to go back and get a university degree if they want to specialise in something and actually, increase the skill levels that they need to be able to do their roles. And that's why we really need to be having a look at what are these other ways that we can be getting these skills, and really have a look at our workforce planning. Because nothing makes me sadder than to see headlines, as we did last year, where you see the NAB, I think, made 6,000 people redundant to bring in 2,000 data scientists. Now, the question that raised in my mind was that were none of those 6,000 people capable of being a data scientist? Really? You know, with sufficient planning ahead of what that workforce needed to look like, surely you can take some of the people in your organisation along on that journey and give them the opportunity to reskill. And it's how we do that reskilling that I believe is really critically important at the moment, when the change, the pace of change and the technological disruption that's likely to be occurring across the world, we only know that pace is going to increase. And so this is actually from TAFE New South Wales, giving a bit of an idea of, what were the jobs of the past, what are the likely jobs of the future. And interestingly enough, professionals, despite the fact that every now and then people do try and kill managers off, professionals and managers are still going to be playing a really important role. I mean, let's face it, we still need humans. But what's interesting is that they predict that digital literacy is going to be demanded in terms of what you see when people are asking for job skills to go towards jobs, is going to be increasingly asked for. And that's the sort of thing that, again, you don't have to go back to university to do, but you do have to be an active learner. So you have to feel confident. But I think everyone here who's involved in the IT sector, again, this is all good news. So, probably everyone in this room has the sort of transferable skills plus the technical skill base to take advantages of a lot of the changes that we're going to be seeing in the future. Now, something that last year in my former role, which was as the Chief Operating Officer of the Australian Centre for Robotic Vision, that we took a lead in, was in commissioning a report on what the technology that we were developing, the kind of influence that was going to have specifically on the Queensland economy. And so we had an economic expert do a report on, we called it the Robotics and Automation Advantage for Queensland. Because you've probably all seen the headlines about how robots are going to take everybody's jobs. That's not a view I subscribe to, and I'll show you some of the data for why I don't subscribe to that view. Because robots aren't humans. Robots are very good at particular tasks, but they are nowhere near being able to do the sort of range of things that we can do. So you might have heard that there was actually quite a lot of consternation around the world when a robot actually beat Lee Sedol, who was the world's champion at the game Go, which is quite a complex game that many people had predicted a machine would never really have the ability to compete with a human. And it did, although I must say Lee did win one game, so it wasn't like that it all went the machine's way. But they've been able to program that machine up. I think it had done about 1 billion, it had played the game about 1 billion times, which is just impossible for a human to do. But if I was Lee Sedol, what I would have been tempted to do was to then actually challenge that machine to a game of poker, or actually a game of anything. Because that machine was only programmed to do one thing, and it did it really well. And that's the sort of advantage that actually deploying more robots and automation can give you. You can make something that can do one particular thing really well, but you're still going to need humans to actually fill in the gaps. We're really great all-rounders, and that's never going to change. But what does this mean specifically for Queensland? Well, what we found was that the industries that will benefit the most from robotics and automation was pretty much everything, okay? And then, what does that actually mean in terms of jobs and revenue for the state? What we found was that over the next 10 years, if Queensland does adopt robotic and automation technology more, that not only will it actually create 725,000 new jobs, but that it will also generate $77 billion to our gross state product. So that's $7 billion a year. Now that's a big figure, and it's also a very conservative figure. So we were only looking at a reasonable uptake of these new technologies, not everyone doing it tomorrow. However, there are a couple of points. We know that Queensland creates jobs automatically because we're such a nice place to be. So we have people moving up from the southern states all the time, and that does mean that we actually are creating new jobs. But this is 500,000 more jobs than you would expect would normally be created in Queensland. So again, this is kind of counterintuitive. You've probably all heard that robots take away jobs. That's not actually true. Robots can create a lot of new jobs. But what is true is that a lot of these new jobs are different jobs to the jobs that currently exist. So some jobs are likely to cease to exist. There will be a whole lot of new jobs. What we need to be very sensitive of is, are we actually giving people the skills that are going to be required for these new jobs that are around the corner? And I suppose the scary message from this report, though, was that for us to get those very conservative benefits of adopting robotics and automation technologies, the kicker is that we have to do it quickly or we won't get those benefits. Because the rest of the world isn't hanging around, waiting to see what's going to happen. They're adopting these technologies right now. And I think for us in Queensland and in Australia more generally, we need to be seeing what we can be doing to support companies to be uptaking these new technologies, or unfortunately the worst economic projections that we had were if we do nothing. And this is a particular challenge for Queensland because Queensland has a really interesting economic structure. 90% of the businesses in Queensland are small to medium businesses. And in small businesses, you can see they employ almost 1 million people. So these are businesses that have 20 people or fewer. And I think when you've a very small business, then you clearly are going to face challenges in how you can upskill your workforce and actually increase your innovation capacity. You don't have the same breadth of numbers in a larger organisation to help move that journey along. So we also need to consider what we can do to help support small business to be able to adapt to a lot of the technological change that is occurring. And I think we also need to be prepared for unexpected impacts. So it's all very well for people, future of the work people, to put out all of these lists of the jobs that are going to be in the future versus the jobs that aren't going to be. I think some of that really is just going to be put to the test of time. We will know as things progress which jobs will be under threat. But I think that people sometimes underestimate that there are roles that actually things like robots can move in and do, which might be unexpected. So we don't see this in Australia yet, but if you were to travel to a country like Japan, what you would see is actually a lot of robots used in retail, which you would think is a very customer-focused, people-focused type of role, but it is also one where you can potentially have a robot doing some of those functions. So I think we do have to be prepared that sometimes the impact and which jobs are going to be affected might be unexpected. Now, I did mention that we'll probably talk a little bit about my career, and I've had a very non-linear career is the way I like to describe it. So I started off actually as a geologist, and so I did my undergraduate degree, then a PhD, moved up here to Queensland on a postdoctoral fellowship, and then actually left my research career behind and moved more into, I suppose, science management and then eventually science commercialisation. And eventually applied that through social sciences to funding water recycling projects. And then, wow, somewhere robotics came in there, and that's now led me to cyber-physical systems, which is kind of like robotics, but with more fun stuff as well. Now, a lot of people kind of ask me, how did you get from rocks to robots? What is a geologist? How did a geologist end up in robotics? And I'm never quite sure how to take that question because sometimes it's said in quite a disbelieving kind of tone of voice. And you know, for all that we think that we're very flexible and adaptable, and that people talk about portfolio careers and how, you know, particularly the younger generation are all going to have multiple careers through their lives, it never seems to surprise many people that I've been able to have exactly what people describe as what people should be doing. Does that make sense? But anyway, so, yes, but it is an interesting question, and I suppose it does go to what we're talking about today, and that's transferable skills. Because while I didn't start off in the IT sector, and obviously, you know, the subject of this talk is, you know, how you actually manage that transition, changing roles within the IT sector. And, you know, really I'm a relative newbie to the IT sector. I've only been in there since I moved over into robotics. But hopefully, you know, I can share some of my experience in actually making that journey from a scientist specialising in the physical sciences through to actually ending up in the IT sector. And I guess one of the big advantages that being an earth scientist gave me was actually having those high-level analytical skills. So my background might not be as a computer scientist or a software engineer, but there is still a lot that I can contribute in the space that I'm currently in. So when I was growing up, you can see on the blonde in that picture, being the youngest, I had to be a bit of a rebel because it's the only way you can get attention. And you can see I had a very early introduction to the mining industry. I'm not quite sure why I wanted to get over the fence there. But I found that when I went to university, I didn't really have much of an idea of what I wanted to do. You know, some people kind of grow up having a fairly clear idea of what they want to do. That was never me. I kind of did science because I thought, well, maybe I'll find something that I'm interested in. And I ended up specialising in earth sciences. I did a lot of work down at the Australian Nuclear Science Technology Organisation as I was doing my degree, spent all of my summers down there. I loved their slogan back then, doing something for the environment. Isn't that awesome? I think we all like to do that. So, you know, I did a lot of interesting things there. I really loved geology. You know, that's me visiting the faculty before it became insanely dangerous. But then, you know, I had to move away from that career and I found myself working in, of all things, metals manufacturing. And so I worked for a cooperative research centre. So it involved researchers from across the country, materials scientists and engineers who were all developing new light metal alloys and other things. Very male-dominated industry. Earth sciences surprisingly wasn't very male-dominated as I studied, but as soon as you got into the workforce, all the women disappeared. I'm still not sure I quite understand how they could so successfully eradicate women from the subject, but that's kind of what happened. So almost unintentionally, I've always ended up working in very male-dominated industries. I kind of keep my links back to my earth sciences roots by being on the board of a cooperative research centre called CRC All, which is the CRC around optimising resource extraction. But yeah, then robotics. How did that happen? Well, I blame my sister. So my sister Andrea, she's my older sister. So really, I did think for many years that it was my duty to ignore any advice that she gave me. But she's actually been in robotics for some time. She did her master's down at the University of Technology in Sydney with the Australian Centre for Field Robotics, but from a social perspective, you know, not from the technical perspective. So I think what often people forget about is that you can't develop technology without having people who are interested in the design factors, but particularly in the social impact. Because we can develop all of these wonderful technologies and they're completely useless if no one actually uses them. So you need not just technical specialists, but people who actually look at how those technologies are going to be applied. So that's us together with our hard hats on. And she's now the managing director of Silicon Valley Robotics. She's based over in the States. She's done a lot of amazing initiatives like the Robot Garden, which is kind of like this awesome maker space, which she tries to make a kind of a female-friendly space for people that want to do stuff with robots. The robot block parties become a bit of an institution over there. And she was telling me for ages that robots were the way of the future and I really should get on board. And as I said, I ignored that for many years. But then an opportunity came up for me to join the Australian Centre for Robotic Vision right at the start, and that was something that I'd always wanted to be involved with. So I'd been involved with research management and commercialisation for quite a long time, but never been there right at the beginning of a new thing where you could create the culture and really drive how that organisation performs right from the beginning. So it was something I was really very keen on, and unfortunately I was lucky enough to get that role, and it has led me to, I guess, some measure of success, whatever that is. And last year I led the development of this thing called the Robotics Roadmap for Australia, because one thing that I recognised very early on when I moved over into robotics was that we actually knew nothing about the robotics industry in Australia. So here was I, tasked with helping develop the talent and technologies in this new field of robotic vision. And my question was, well, to what end? Why would we be developing all of these talent and technologies when we don't even know where they would go within Australia? And so this led to a whole thing where we kind of tried to do a capability map of what people were doing in this space in Australia, because I think it's really important, if we're going to invest a lot of money in developing people who specialise in these technologies, that we find ways to make sure that we're keeping that talent and technologies here in Australia, and that they don't, unfortunately, all leak overseas. But I guess to get to that point where I was able to get that role with the Australian Centre for Robotic Vision, I'll go back to an old staple of mine. The book's getting quite old now, but it really has had quite an influential it's been quite influential on my career. I've been lucky enough to meet the author, Peter Fisk, who is also an earth scientist, but he put this book together. Now, maybe it's not relevant to many of you in the room, but I'm putting it out there because a lot of what I'm going to tell you is actually from this book, and some of it, I hope you don't think that I'm telling you to suck eggs. It might seem very basic, but this is kind of the recipe that's worked for me, and maybe you'll find something useful in it. But this book, Put Your Science to Work, was very influential because particularly for someone like me who was going through with a very academic background, where you only really see other researchers, and yet there's only a 10% chance that you'll ever actually get a career in academia. What's always frustrated me is that a lot of young researchers never really get exposure to what else is out there, how else they can apply their skills. And this book was really a breakthrough for me at the time. So it was released just as I was finishing my PhD, and it was really about how you look at what skills you have and how you can frame those in terms of the opportunity that you're interested in pursuing, if that makes sense. And one of the most important things, or places to start, was really just doing a bit of self-assessment. And there are heaps of different self-assessment tools that you can use. Many of them are free and online, but it really is an important process to go through. I mean, it's one thing, and we're talking about transferable skills today, and I'd encourage you all to actually at some point just sit down and go through that discipline of listing what you think your transferable skills are and examples of how you apply them. But I think it's also really handy to go through this other self-assessment process that gives you an idea of, okay, well, I've got these skills and experience, but where do I really want to apply them? What is it that actually motivates me? Because understanding, what motivates you and what makes it easier for you to get up in the morning just makes life a lot more simple. There's nothing worse than having, and you've probably seen it yourself, there's nothing worse than having a work colleague who hates their work. Please find something else to do, find something else that actually does make you want to get up in the morning. So I think that this is a really important process. So sorry, yes, I've already kind of moved into this, using self-assessment to try and figure out what it is where your skills and experience maybe should be applied in ways that will motivate you. But then career planning is also important. Now, I always resisted this like the plague. I'm the sort of person that if you ask me to sit down and do a process diagram, I really would rather poke my eyeball out with a ballpoint pen. But actually sitting down and writing a plan can be very useful. Although I would caution you to treat it like a birth plan. For those of you who have children, you probably know what I mean. Birth plans are awesome, but they can go completely wrong from like the first 5 minutes. So you can't rely on them too much. But it is kind of handy to get your thoughts in order and think, well, maybe if everything goes in a particular way, this might be a path that I could choose. And it helps you with this whole exploration of self and environment, gives you some more focus. And then what I loved from the book was, Peter suggested this 80-10-10 rule. Has anyone heard of this rule? Yeah, a few? Basically, it's how you should probably be looking at spending your time. So every day, you should be dividing your time up into this 80-10-10 kind of format. Now, 80% of your time should be spent, kind of doing your work and being awesome. 10% of your time should be spent on self-development. So, looking at new things that you can learn, new opportunities. And then the other 10% of your time should be spent telling other people how awesome you are. Now, I think for Australians, that's a really, really hard ask, and I can't say that I'm actually that good at it, but I think there's a lot in that. I think particularly for women, because I think that this is sometimes where we undersell ourselves, because we all know that, we can do great work, but that means nothing if no one else recognises that you're doing great work. And I think that unfortunately, girls in particular are kind of taught that if they're quiet at school and they get good grades, that they get rewarded. And that is true, right up until you finish university. And then it's a different ballgame, because it then becomes a more social environment. And people will judge you based on what other people say. You won't be able to just point to a mark that you got on an exam. And it's not a fair process. It's not objective. It's very subjective. But you're not helping the process if you don't give people the information that they need to assess how good you are. And so although I think this is a really uncomfortable piece of advice, I actually urge you to really consider it. Because unless people know what you're doing and what your skills are, people are busy. They're not going to go out of their way to find out what it is that you're good at and why, and what it is that makes you tick, and in particular, what direction you want to be in next. It can be really powerful to tell people what your ambitions are. And I know this is excruciatingly uncomfortable. And I can tell you all of this because I'm old now, and this has taken me a long time to kind of find my peace with. If you can actually short-circuit that process and learn a bit younger, I really highly recommend it. Now, one thing that I found was also a great tip from the book, and if you haven't heard of it and you don't do it, please think of doing this. It's just called informational interviewing, and it's really very simple. It's just about going out and talking to people. But why is this important? And I know a lot of people who do fail to do this. It's when you are thinking of having a career change or taking on a new role, but you don't take the time to actually go out and find out about that new role, to really see whether it's a good fit for you. So all informational interviewing is about using your networks. Actually, if you're thinking about a career change, before you do anything, just scan your networks. Find out, do I actually know anyone who works in that business? I have a view of what this job is like, but is that actually how it is on a day-to-day basis? So at one point during my career, I had this crazy idea that perhaps it wasn't too late for me to kind of get back into earth sciences. And at the time, oil and gas was just going off in Queensland. And I thought, maybe I should move back in. And so I started scanning my networks. I found another mum at the school whose husband was working for an energy company, and then another old geology friend of mine who had moved up to Brisbane. And so I went out, had a coffee with them, asked them a bit about what their jobs were like, what their days were like, and I discovered that I would hate it. I would hate it with a passion, and gee, did that save me a lot of pain and fruitless time applying for jobs and roles that I would never have liked, but that I didn't know any better because I hadn't done those jobs before. So just simply talking to people, and the other benefit of that was that if I had pursued that, I then had some inside people in those energy companies who would have told me about opportunities that were in those companies, and even in some cases probably put my name forward. So it costs really little, but great benefits. Highly recommend this if you're thinking of changing roles. And again, I think this is really important in terms of building up your coalition of support, which is an area I think that actually women potentially have a bit of a disadvantage to men. Because often we're not thinking about who is it that's who's on our team, who is it that is going out there and advocating on our behalf. Think about it and do a stock take of your own life. Who is it that you're going to put down as your reference, for a new job? if people ring them up, are they going to give you a glowing recommendation? And if the answer is, oh, well, maybe they'll give me, something, well, no, go back to the drawing board and actually map out who your coalition of support is again, because you need people who will really go out there and fight for you. And that's what a lot of the people that you're competing with in the job market will have. So, and sometimes that's uncomfortable, having to kind of analyse that and whether people really are on your side or not, but I think it is really important. Probably won't spend too much on this but what I will say is that, I've never been in that fortunate position where someone's just given me a job. So, despite how old I am now, I have always had to interview for a job. I guess in the government this is probably just goes without saying, but there are some fortunate people who, the sun seems to shine on them and they actually seem to be able to circumvent this process, but that's never happened for me. So I've always had to take a lot of care in how I put my CVs and my cover letters and put interviews together. And the reason you saw how, as I said, non-linear my career was, and that was really crucial for me to spend that time on these, because otherwise people do say, well, okay, you're a geologist, now you want to be in robotics, huh? You have to use these tools to be able to explain to people why that makes sense. And what are the skills that you're bringing to this role that no one else can bring? So really think about how you invest time in these. This is just a little bugbear of mine. I find, I don't know how many people also do a lot of job interviews, but a killer cover letter, that will get you in the door for an interview with me every single day, because it shows that you've spent the time to really research the company, that you know what it is that we want, and that you're really trying to show us how your skills fit with that particular job opportunity. Easy, come in for an interview as soon as I see a cover letter like that. So my personal view is that these are really important. It might be different if someone, if I'm not the one reading your job application, maybe that's not true, but for me this has worked. And presumably it's worked in my career because, I guess it never would go astray to put the time in to do a good cover letter. And obviously with the interviews, it doesn't do to underestimate the amount of time that you probably need to prepare for a job interview, and actually again go through that process of having a good understanding of the company that it is that you want to work for, and being able to really clearly explain how the skills that you bring to the position are going to help them in what they're trying to achieve. It sounds really simple, but for anyone who's sat on an interview panel, you've probably seen how often people don't actually seem to put that level of thought into the process. And importantly, and I guess I've probably been coming at this from a few different angles, it's about developing that narrative, about how the skills that you have actually fit in with the opportunity that you're interested in. And, to be perfectly honest, and I'm sure this is true for most people, a lot of the time I've just jumped at opportunities. Did it make sense? Well, maybe after a while, after I've spent a bit of time crafting the narrative, but not always. I mean, I've moved from a role where essentially I was working as a broker for research and development in water recycling into setting up a robotic vision research centre. Like, how do those two things go together? So, in somewhere there, I kind of had an idea of why I wanted to go and take that step. But I needed to be able to articulate it, and sometimes it can take some time to develop that narrative. And I think that's, if you are looking at changing roles and looking at moving into something that's maybe a bit different to what has happened in your past, this is really very important. Now, I just wanted to touch on a book that was very influential on me by Napoleon Hill, and he wrote one of the best-selling kind of self-help books of all time, Think and Grow Rich. And in that he said, whatever you can conceive and believe, you can achieve. And seriously, I think this is some of the worst career advice for a woman ever. Because we all know that that might be fine for one half of the population, but there doesn't seem to me to be a whole queue of people that are just sort of standing in line to nominate women for awards. We know that women are nominated for awards like the Australia Day Honours at like less than a third of the rate of men. And there are all of these other metrics by which you get measured when you're going for jobs, where it really matters what other people say about you. It matters whether you've been nominated for awards. And certainly just thinking about it and believing you can do it is not going to get you there, okay? So that's why I actually don't recommend this book. I recommend his How to Sell Your Way Through Life. Because I think that in everybody's career journey, no matter what sector that you're in, the influence of other people is what is important. Because no matter how individually brilliant you are, and for a long time I made the mistake of thinking that that was actually all that was required, individual brilliance, but then you learn pretty soon that that's actually not the case. You do rely on other people, much as sometimes you probably wish you didn't. And that's why building up a coalition of support whenever you're looking at making a change in role is critical. Really do a scan of your environment and ask some hard questions about who is on your side, who will actually, go to the floor to argue your case with someone. Because if you don't have that, and if you don't have that level of support, you need to go out and find it. It's really important. Which brings me to, I guess, some of my final points. A lot of the things that I've suggested to you probably are going to make you feel uncomfortable. Now, that's not the same sort of discomfort as having your child stolen by a velociraptor. That's bad discomfort, and you should do something about this, okay? Don't let your child be taken by a velociraptor. But there's a whole lot, but this is a cliche, I know, but it really is true, that, we all have our comfort zone where we're comfortable operating. But that's not where the magic happens. The magic happens when you get outside your comfort zone. And you really do have to be quite purposeful about taking yourself outside of your comfort zone. And I do this by applying this particular test. It's my If I Were a Bloke test. I apply this when I'm looking at my CV, when I'm looking at my cover letter, and I look at it and go, would I say that if I were a bloke? Or would perhaps I say that a bit more strongly? Or would I put myself up for that award? And then I say, well, if I were a bloke, would I put myself up for that award? You'd be surprised how different the answers can be, okay? And so I always go for the, if I were a bloke, would I do this? Okay, well then I'm going to do it. It's going to make me feel really uncomfortable. In fact, sometimes excruciatingly so. But it's important. Because if you find that the answer to this question is, if I were a bloke, yes, I would do this, then you can be sure that that's exactly what a lot of your competition is doing, okay? And finally, I think it's important, and particularly in an environment like this, which I think is a really supportive environment, women in technology, that we all need to really remember to be kind to people. My eldest daughter was born with a cleft palate. We've had to do lots and lots of hospital visits, and one of the things that I really have appreciated through that time are some of the amazing women who, through all of the sort of trials and tribulations, have taken the time to be kind. And sometimes these are people that, I would never see again and don't even know their names, but people who, when I've been trying to breastfeed in an airport toilet, will just come up to me and say, good on you, you're doing well, keep going. Just little things like that can make a big difference. And I think sometimes we can forget, just in the hustle bustle of trying to get everything done, that everyone has a life outside work, and that sometimes there can be challenges in those lives, and that it really does pay to be kind. It can really give other people strength to keep going. And a final word on success. I put up a bit of a slide about some of the stuff that has happened since I've kind of moved into this robotics area. And, I guess those are what I call the external trappings of success. But that's probably not necessarily what success means to you, and certainly not what success means to me. It's actually that internal success that I find is the most important, and that's completely dependent on you and how you feel about yourself. So I like to think of that as, in terms of the ingredients required for these different types of success, other people for external success, really important. Other people who will nominate you for things, who will actually have your back, will talk up for you if you're going for a new role. But internal success, that's completely driven by you and I guess your perspective on your own life. And so it's something you have 100% control over. And anyway, hopefully you can find some great balance between both internal and external success. And where I wanted to finish was just to let you know of another kind of my passion project on the side, is to bring the Grace Hopper celebration to Australia. Now, hopefully quite a lot of you will have heard of this. It is the world's largest gathering of women technologists, and the whole point of this is to celebrate the achievements of women technologists. And I'm really pleased to let you know that this is just an example of the Grace Hopper celebration over in the States. They actually capped the numbers at 22,000. It's like being at a rock concert. It is just unbelievable. It is the most amazing thing ever. And we have, and one of the really important aspects of this is a careers fair. So all of the companies that require tech talent and want to recruit for diversity go all to the Grace Hopper celebration. And it's a great way for women to actually be able to get a sense of how a lot of these companies do treat inclusion and diversity. And please save the date, because we are bringing Grace Hopper to Brisbane 29th to 31st of July. We're calling the Hopper Down Under. It's not going to be 22,000 people, but it will be somewhere between 600 and 1,000 people. First time it's ever been to our shores. The president of Anita B, Brenda Darden-Wilkinson, is coming across. We've got the Anita B all team 100% on board. It's going to be tight. We don't have a lot of time to get it all happening, but it will be happening here in Brisbane, and we'll probably anchor it here until we can get it established in the Asia Pacific, and then perhaps it will move from city to city. But we think this first one will be a bit of a trial, but it is an opportunity, if you can't get over to the main Grace Hopper celebration, for us to really celebrate the achievements of women technologists right here in Australia, and also to give a lot of Australian companies the opportunity to recruit for diversity. So I encourage you, if you can, save the date and please come along. Thank you.